Steve from Samba New York here, and in this lesson I'll be teaching you two of the most typical basic patterns for the third surdo or surdo de terceira, which is typically the smallest and highest pitched of the three surdo bass drums in a samba school bateria or percussion section. Before we get to these rhythms themselves, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the surdo that I have here. It's a beautiful, great sounding surdo by Contemporanea. It has an animal skin head on the top and a plastic head on the bottom. And it has legs on it so I can play it seated. And so in the samba schools in Rio de Janeiro, for example, the third surdo tends to be about 18 or 20 inches in diameter in most schools, as far as I know. And in Samba New York, we prefer this size, which is 16 inches for our third surdos. And it all depends on the different sizes of the first, second, and third surdos in your bateria. For example, in Samba New York, we have a 22-inch first surdo, 20-inch second surdo, and a 16-inch third surdo, okay? So that's a matter of personal choice, what sizes you prefer. So the 16-inch surdo, I think, is a really great and manageable size for a bateria, particularly if you don't have a lot of space or if people are carrying their own surdos to rehearsal and performances. 16 inches is a very manageable size. In Brazil, the surdos can be a lot larger. But in any case, it's up to you and your bateria what size surdos you have. Okay, so let's jump into the rhythms. So this was actually the first pattern on the third surdo that I learned. But before we get to that, I wanted to just explain a little bit about what the first and second surdos do in a typical samba school bateria. So the first surdo, or surdo de marcação, or marking surdo, plays on beats 2 and 4 of the 4-beat cycle of the samba. Okay, and typically the first surdo is the largest and deepest pitched of the three surdos, and it can be 24, 26 inches, for example, in Rio, even larger, up to 29 inches in diameter. And as I said, in Samba New York, we have a bit of a smaller one, 22 inches. And the second surdo is also known as the surdo de resposta, or the answering surdo, because it answers the marking surdo while playing on beats 1 and 3. This is actually really interesting because in European terms, the instrument that would mark the time would most likely be the one that plays on the 1 and the 3. But since samba has its roots in Africa, specifically in the Congo-Angola region of Africa, the conception is very different. So the bass drum that's said to be marking the time, in other words, playing the most essential beats, is the one playing on beats 2 and 4. So it's very much an African thing and an African way of conceiving of the music. Obviously, samba also has European influence as well, but I think it's really important to understand those African roots and the terminology and how they come out of those out of that perspective, that African perspective. Okay, so the second surdo is typically medium-sized and medium pitch, playing on 1 and 3. The first surdo is typically the largest and the deepest pitched of the three surdos, playing on beats 2 and 4. So if you put those two together, you have the basic pulse of the bateria. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Second surdo, first surdo, second surdo, first surdo, boom, 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 boom. Now, how the third surdo developed is the most widely accepted story, I would say, seems to be that the musician Tião Miquimba from the Mocidade Independente de Padre Miguel Samba School in Rio, together with Mestre André, who's a very famous mestre de bateria from the Padre Miguel Samba School, Mocidade, are credited with the creation of the third surdo. So basically the story goes, and this is from Tião Miquimba's personal first-hand testimony. You can see a video of this on TV. It's also on YouTube. And Tião Miquimba claims that he was, this is in the late 1950s, that he was mid or late 1950s, that he was playing one of the surdos that they had, which was either a first or a second, presumably, and it was a large surdo, and he was adding some extra notes on it. And Mestre André, so the story goes, didn't really want him to do that, so he said, listen, I'm gonna I'm gonna make a smaller surdo for you to play those variations that you were playing on the bigger surdo, and hence we have the creation of the third surdo. Okay, so there are some other accounts of how the third surdo was created, but as far as I know, none of those are actually verified. So this is actually one where we have firsthand testimony from Chiao Mikimba, the one who was credited with inventing the drum himself along with Mestre André. So let's get right into the role of the third surdo. The role of the third surdo these days in the samba schools in Rio and in other places is basically to, in many cases, to support what the first surdo is playing on beats 2 and 4, because in many cases the third surdo is playing on top of beats 2 and 4 while adding other notes, so playing repeated syncopated pattern. There isn't just one basic pattern on the third surdo. There are various, and it depends on which samba school you're playing in. Okay, so there is a style of playing the third surdo where the third surdo players will avoid playing on top of the first surdo, which is kind of like a very particular style, but otherwise they'll be playing together with the first surdo and supporting the first surdo on beats 2 and 4, while, as I said, playing other notes, so playing these kind of repeated syncopated patterns. So the first basic pattern that I learned on the third surdo is this one. You may know this one, which is just 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, O 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, O 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, O 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, O 1. Okay, so a couple of things to keep in mind. I've seen different teachers teach this different ways. I've seen people saying that you need to accent the first note of each grouping. So 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, O 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, O 1. I've also heard teachers say, no, accent the other notes that are not the 2 and the 4, so those notes pop out more. So it seems to be a bit of a subjective thing, a matter of taste. In any case, I tend to accent the first note of each grouping a little bit more. And another thing is that I make sure that 3-note grouping is played with the characteristic Brazilian swing or samba swing. Okay, there is a video that I posted previously to the channel that discusses that. It's called a sneak peek into the third surdo intensive certificate course. Check out that video, okay? Because I'm not going to get into this in depth here. All right, so check out that video and you'll see a little bit more about how I conceive of phrasing those that 3-note grouping so that they incorporate the samba swing. All right, so let's get into this pattern again. So you have an option. You could play the muted notes just on 1 and 3. So 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, O 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, O 1. So in other words, you're muting on top of the second surdo. Okay, so that's one option. Another option is that you can actually play a syncopated pattern in the left hand, similar to the kind of pattern that you would play, somewhat similar to what you would play on a single surdo in a small group samba context, like similar to that, but you're going to go 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, O 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, O 1. So in this case, you're always playing open notes in the right hand or your dominant hand with the mallet. So in the case of the left hand, you're always going to be going 1, and the will be coming off the head. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, Okay, so 1, 2, and 3, 4 E. Sorry, not all 4 beats, but you're going to be going 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, O 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, O 1. Okay, so you have two options. You could play it either way. This one adds a little more rhythmic interest to it, a little more syncopation. But you can just as well play this one. And they're both completely valid. Totally valid. Okay, so it's a matter of personal choice, which one you play. Unless, of course, in your bateria or in your group, there's a specific way that the director wants you to play play the third surdo. Okay, so that's the first pattern, and the second pattern is one that I believe Mestre Odilon, another famous mestre de bateria from Rio, created, which is a 2-measure pattern, and I believe he created it originally for the Grande Rio Samba School, which he was the mestre of for many years. And this one makes use of a bit of a variation. So it's kind of a variation built into the basic pattern. So it goes like this. Measure 1 is going to be identical to this first pattern, which is just 1, 2, and 3, 4, E, 1. Okay. Measure 2 is going to be 1, 2, and 3, and 4, E, 1. Okay. So let's do measure 2 again. 1, 2, and 3, and. So beats 1 and 2 are going to be 1 in the left hand, 2 and in the right hand, and then beat 3 is going to be left, right. So 3 and then beat 4 is going to be left, right, right, or 4 E, okay? So putting measures 1 and 2 together of the second pattern, we get 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E, 2 and 3, 4 E, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 E, 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 E, 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 E, 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 E, 1. Now let's try it with the syncopated left hand. 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 E, 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 E, 1. A little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2 and 3, 4 E, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 E, 1. Syncopated left hand. So there you have it, 2 of the most typical basic patterns for the third surdo. There are many other basic patterns for the third surdo, not just these, but these I think are are 2 patterns that are great to start with because they're so common and so typical. So have fun with them. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video.